I think purpose is just what we're supposed to do to impact the next person, or to bring an idea or leave our mark on this world. And it doesn't matter how big of that reach is, it's how deep that reach is.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. My name is Nancy Moore, and I am the host of this weekly podcast that provides career and creative inspiration to help you build a passionate and purpose-filled life. You'll hear from guests that will help you tap into your creative potential, pursue a career with passion, and build on your biggest and best resource, yourself. I'm excited to have you join this conversation. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get started. In this episode, you'll hear from mother of four, Brittany Stokes, who's the co-founder of Project Orphans and Tulsa Girls Home. What started as a desire to help young people abroad, Project Orphans has grown into a pursuit to assist local children through Tulsa Girls Home. Surprisingly, this remarkable program that helps girls aging out of foster care didn't exist prior to Stokes' efforts. Both impactful projects are near and dear to her heart as they serve as a resource that changes the narrative for these young kids. Now, locally, young women who are aging out of foster care have access to resources and a beautiful, safe place to live. This visit shares more about Brittany's background, her journey into starting Tulsa Girls Home and Project Orphan, and dives into her passion for helping and her purpose in doing so. Before we dive into this episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank my sponsor, Tanya Bledsoe with State Farm Insurance. Tanya is my insurance agent, and I highly recommend her. She's knowledgeable about the industry and can be trusted to coach you on the level of insurance coverage you need. She's passionate about helping people and families cover their biggest assets, including life, home, and auto. Get a quote from Tanya today. She's located in Tulsa at 3307 South Harvard Avenue. And you can reach her online at calltanya.com. It's call-tania.com, or call 918-600-2583. Again, 918-600-2583. And now, I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Brittany. So, Brittany, I am so happy to have you on the podcast. This is such a treat for me to be visiting with you today. You're absolutely incredible. And when we met for the first time, I really didn't know a lot about you. And after researching the Tulsa Girls Home and having a mutual connection, found out a little bit more about you. So I'm excited to get to know you better, have my audience get to know you better. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. So if you'll just start out by telling us just a little about your upbringing and your family, that would be great.
Yeah. So I'm originally born from Ohio and grew up there until I was around 5 years old. And then my parents moved to Tulsa. They both met at ORU, and they really just wanted to bring a family up here in Oklahoma. And so really just Tulsa native, grew up here, and graduated from Victory Christian School, and then went to ORU, and then worked here in corporate America for about 6-7 years, consulting and doing all the things, to just build my career, and just really pivoted. I met my husband at ORU. He was a college basketball coach, and I cheered. So that's, your nice little cliche there. And yeah, just really have loved Tulsa and love being part of this community. Like you said, it is a big city, but such a small town, and our circles always kind of come in path cross with the most unique people, and I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about when you were at ORU, what you decided to study, because that's influenced your trajectory even to where you are today?
Yeah, so I graduated with a bachelor's in public relations and advertising, and then I minored in finance. So I immediately started working in an advertising firm. It was called Brothers and Company, and now it's called the Idea Ranch, and particularly worked with Under Armour, Remington Firearms, and some larger brands, nationwide. And did that for a little while. Also worked with cancer treatment centers in their marketing department, and really was just trying to explore. I graduated from college when I was 20, and so I just really wanted to get that out there and figure out what I wanted to do. And through a undiscovered path, which I always say, you don't know everything that's going to come about. Everyone's like, how do you get into this? And I think it's funny because everything that I did really set me up for the things that came along in my life further down the road. So yeah, I did that, and then I went into consulting and helped build websites and consulted with brands all around the world. And my best friend and I, Christina Yared, she is the co-founder of one of the organizations we founded. We love to travel. We love the beach. Anytime we can escape, we do that. And I was on a trip, and really just something kind of fell into my heart about taking care of others and doing something outside of just, this corporate race that I was running. And that's really what my purpose was, I feel like. And it's funny, whenever I got married, I remember telling Kyron, I don't know if I'll have a ton of children. We might have children when I'm 35. And actually today is our 13th anniversary. And so we just celebrated that. And he goes, I just want to say my life would be very boring if I would have married anyone else. And I thought that was funny because it's true. The life that we've lived in 13 years, I could give you stories that it's a mind-blowing. And it's been a life of purpose and meaning. And with that, heartbreak and, just it's never easy, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that I've had to take away is, just because you find your thing doesn't mean it's going to be easy doing that thing. But I remember someone saying, go after something that makes you cry, or something that makes you angry, or something that makes you super excited to get out of bed. And that's what you should do. That's what you should change. That's what you should have an impact in doing. And so I really have followed that.
So when you had that epiphany on the beach, then what was your step after that?
Yeah, so that's funny. So Christina was working in corporate America for American Express, and I was doing my own thing as well, consulting. And so we really were like, let's just help the orphan. That's just really sad. But we never really wanted to get deep. So we were like, let's just fundraise and, raise money to make a difference, and maybe provide homes for couples who've moved overseas and, are really impacted and wanting to make a difference in that country. And so that's really where we started. Really do events, raise money, donate, support, and man, did it just turned into something completely different. We actually built homes, 3 homes in Guatemala, a home in Brazil, a home in Haiti, and then a home in Uganda, Africa. And we kept going back to Uganda. And we just fell in love with the country. We also saw a lot of corruption with Americans who were, doing this type of work, helping orphans and exploitation. And really that bothered me. And so after going to Uganda several times and pouring into the country in different ways and people who had been planted there, we really felt like it was our time to open our own thing. So we established our own NGO, which is similar to a nonprofit here in Oklahoma, in Uganda. And it really just took off, to be honest. And so now we have 51 people on our staff. We've built hospitals. We have a school for special needs, a school for preschoolers, and then an elementary school. And then we have a women's shelter and foster homes, and it is alive and thriving. And we always laugh. We were like, we're supposed to just be the ones who donated, not be ingrained and enmeshed. And I wouldn't have it any other way. We have an amazing team in Uganda. George and Sarah, they're local Ugandans, and they really are just the best directors that we could have asked for. True family. And we've got about 150 kids who are in our what I would like to say in our nucleus of the core of Project Orphans, those who we work very closely with the local police. And so we will get those cases, extreme abuse cases, and then those kids really become part of our organization until they turn 18, 19, 20 years old, depending on that trajectory for their course and their life. And then we probably touch around 3,000 to 4,000 lives each month based on, the hospital and the other programs that we have within the organization.
Okay, that's unbelievable. I didn't know a lot about Project Orphan.
Yeah.
So how you and I connected is through the Tulsa Girls Home.
Yes.
And so you mentioned that Project Orphan is the umbrella
yes.
of Tulsa Girls Home. So if you'd share a little bit more about then how that came about.
Yeah, so a lot of times you see these international organizations really wanting to adopt children out. And we just decided to do it differently. We really wanted to empower the local community to stay local, keep things local, support local. And so we really brought the foster care model to the country of Uganda, specifically where we were serving. So let's say there is an abandoned child, we would find someone who we could educate and support and send, resources to, but then that local mama could raise that child in that culture. And so my husband and I were like, my husband was, I really brought the idea of I don't want to adopt, but I would love to foster. And so we started the journey to foster and ended up actually having our own daughter, Briley, and then having Kinley. And I think my heart just broke even more when that happened, because I couldn't imagine a child not feeling that their mother or their father didn't want them. And often it's not that they didn't want them. The child often says, what did I do wrong for them not to want me? So it's this self-blame, self-mutilation that often occurs. And so my heart was just I would never want Briley or Kinley to ever think that. And it just really heightened my awareness. So we started fostering. We probably had 6 to 8 kids that we fostered along our way, and then ended up adopting our daughter Miracle, who was 16 at the time, and had to go through a lot with that. She came into our home after being in foster care for 9 years. She was living with a mayor here in Oklahoma who was her foster father and who had been sexually abusing her. And so we had to, fight for justice. And I remember going down to the DA of Muskogee and sitting on the porch and being like, something is going to happen here. And, I remember looking and he said, this stack of paperwork are just cases just like hers. And I was like, well, this one matters to me now. And so that was a 1.5 year legal battle, and he ended up getting 7.5 years in jail. And Miracle was just one of the most sweetest, kindest humans ever, and then came with so much trauma. And I think there's so much when it comes to foster care that people don't know, and misconceptions. But during that process, I was a director of a domestic violence and human sex trafficking shelter here in Oklahoma. They were going through some changes, and during that time, I was meeting all these women coming in, from these DV situations, and they had somehow either touched the foster care system or had been part of that system and had multiple DHS cases. And I remember meeting this one younger mom. She had a 6-month-old at the time, and she was around 21, and she had aged out of foster care, ended up on the streets, got abused, and then her child was going into foster care, and here she was in a shelter. And I was like, what are we doing to stop this? And so that really became the search for, let's mitigate this on the front end so we don't see this on the back end. And I had done some work marketing and consulting with Tulsa Boys Home, and so I called Greg Conway, and I was like, Greg, can you do girls too? What's the deal? And he's like, no, that's just not what we want to do. And he's very honest. He said, girls are difficult. Girls are hard. And I was like, well, that's really not the best answer, Greg. We got to do something. He's like, why don't you do it? And I was like, okay, why not? And I went and visited several other homes in the state that were for-profit and group homes, and I just would never put my daughter there. And so I said, let's do something different. And then that birthed Tulsa Girls Home. And so the boys' home has been around 140 years. The girls' home is going on 3. I like to say we are 100 years behind. And so the Tulsa Girls Home holds 8 girls, 14 to 18, who are in foster care. And I like to say they are true survivors of the most horrific things. And we recently moved to Jinx, seeing that need that after 18, there isn't a place to go. And unless you want to go back to an abusive situation or be dropped off at an adult shelter, those were our options. And I was like, that's really not going to work for me. So we moved to Jinx, who was awesome and opened their arms to us, to this mission. And our new campus allows us to expand and grow. So we're opening 2 townhomes next week that will be for our girls 18 to 21. And then we are working to build 2 additional ones, so that will house 8. So truly, since opening, we've doubled in size. And we just keep putting one step in front of the other. And I think, like I said, it's evolved. I just finished my master's degree in counseling, and I just passed the national certification exam, which was amazing. I am so thankful. That happened last week. And so, like I said, I could fill you with stories and the things that have happened along the way. But I think what I love about your podcast is that purpose part is so important. And I think for women trying to discover that, social media has really created this thing that if it isn't like someone else's or as big as someone else's, or your charity isn't as big, or your store or the brand that you're creating. But I don't think that's ever what we should be comparing ourselves to, because I think purpose is just what we're supposed to do to impact the next person, or to bring an idea or leave our mark on this world. And it doesn't matter how big of that reach is, it's how deep that reach is. And that really moved me and helps me do what I do, because this problem that we try to tackle every single day is so large and so emotionally draining, and it's expensive, and it's, all these things. But for the one, it's worth it, and it's deep. And so that's where I have to stay and focus. And so that purpose is really intentional every day.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Congratulations on passing that exam.
Yes, it's such a relief. I normally am not a shout out person for myself, but that was something I wanted for me. That degree, it wasn't for anything else. And so I honestly didn't tell anyone. For 5 years I was doing schooling because I think people would have thought I was crazy. And so, but it gave me so much joy. And I think when you go back to school, even older, you appreciate it in a different way.
So can you share too, so it's a master's degree?
In counseling, yes. So they're a therapist. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then what was the national certification? What specifically?
So I didn't know when you go to school for counseling that you have to take this exam, and basically if you don't pass this exam, you really can't use your degree. And so I was like, this whole degree cost a ton of money, and they told me, they're like, you have to study for about 3 months, 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. And I'm like, I do not have that type of time. And so I kind of just crammed 2 weeks ago and just went hardcore in, and I was like, I'm just going to go in and figure out what the baseline of me failing is, and then I'll work my way up. But thankfully I passed, and so I am now going to be a licensed therapist.
Okay. I want to circle back to purpose.
Yeah.
So that the whole Project Orphan, the Tulsa Girls Home, all of that has centered around your purpose.
Yeah.
And it is incredible, I believe, what one person can do. And I know you said you had a best friend who helped you with Project Orphan. Is she also helping you?
She's also the co-founder for Tulsa Girls Home. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and she does a lot of the legal and, working with the accountant and all of those things. So she's very hands-off in the day-to-day operations, but she's just an awesome soundboard along the way. And again, we didn't expect it to be to this level. I remember just starting out and going to coffee shops and putting little flyers to sponsor a child, or working with local businesses and, just trying to get out there and just on our free time. And it was actually through a lot of the marketing I was doing. I was meeting these big brands. So I built the website for Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles in California. And so they were a sponsor, and then Pitbull Energy Drink and Lux Furniture and Design here in Tulsa. And, so a bunch of brands, a bunch of companies. And that's really what grew Project Orphans, was those connections, those relationships. So I always say too, I look at it, just because you're not doing what you want to do right then, or just because this thing isn't thriving, I never stepped away from full-time work to run this organization for 10 years. And I think that's a very big part of the success of the organization as well, because it was very hard. I never got paid from Project Orphans or Tulsa Girls Home until probably 3 years ago, when Tulsa Girls Home was launched. And that was really just because it needed more feet on the ground. We have around 11 staff here in Tulsa. But it was a passion and a purpose to just be and do Project Orphans and these kids that we were loving on and helping and supporting. And so I couldn't imagine taking money at that time from that. And that was really hard, actually, because I was working 2 to 3 jobs, and having multiple clients. And finally someone was like, have you ever thought that your organization is not doing what it's supposed to do because you aren't fully in? And that was a motivator for me to finally launch and be 100% committed, and then not worry about what people thought about from the fact that I got paid to help people. And I think just because I had seen so much corruption in this field, but it was a really great mentor. And he said, you're really holding it back. So if not you, who are we going to put to lead this organization so it grows? And ultimately it was, that step. And so I'm excited. It's grown so much. And often people ask me, how do you get started with something like this? What does that look like? And especially moms, and, I have 4 kids, and, it's just one day at a time. And I think that's the biggest thing is I think you can freeze because it seems so overwhelming. I didn't know how to open a hospital in a different country and, work with 50 people and across, the seas, and, all the legalities that come with that, and let alone open a group home in the state of Oklahoma with DHS and all the things that happen there. But it's just one step at a time. And you take your checklist and you highlight, and then there are times you have to sacrifice. That's been the hardest part, is my kids were really young. We also adopted our son Evan, and I think that there's grace and when you do step out in your purpose, because that flows into your kids and into your family. And sometimes you have to say no, and I was very intentional on what no's I said and what yeses I said. But I have to say too, my children have really seen this world in a totally different way. And I often say, I know I'm raising them, but also these experiences are raising them. And I was just watching my girls do cheerleading at the football game last week, and I was just so proud of them. I almost started crying because they were little leaders, and then they see hurting people and know how to pull them in. And even sometimes our girls at the girls' home, they know how to talk and, well, let's talk about that. Well, moms shouldn't make you feel that way, and just really show them love. And it's funny, Evan got on stage one day and they asked him how many siblings, and he said, too many. And I love that, because, we always say family is more than blood at our home, and it's really who you bring in, and everyone deserves family.
Okay, yeah. And I know you absolutely believe that to your core, because you're making that happen.
Yeah.
For so many.
Yeah.
Your reach it's unbelievable how extensive it is. abroad, and then luckily for us here in Oklahoma. What would you say, how could people get involved or give or whatever to the Tulsa Girls Home, to Project Orphan?
Yeah, so the first thing I like to say before even money is how you can get involved is shifting our perception of kids who are in foster care and, the orphan. And I've just seen this bias against these kids, even when we were foster care kids, are they going to do anything bad at, when you drop them off at Sunday school or, and I'm like, no. They're kids. Like, yes, there are those who have higher trauma and needs and behaviors, but I say behind every behavior is an unmet need. And if we would see that and look at that, we would respond so differently. And so even when a girl acts out at Tulsa Girls Home, I'll be like, well, why did you do that? And I'm like, that makes complete sense to me, why you reacted that way or yelled at me that way. Because maybe I said it like your mom did. Or that Disney show that came on was this song that something really bad happened to you. And I often say before we think or respond of what that human is, let's give them a chance to explain. And then we can really meet that need. And that's really what we need to do here in Oklahoma. We need to change our perspective of what kids in foster care deserve, what kids in foster care are, and how we can relabel them as true survivors who are really just struggling how to survive. Manipulation saved their lives most of the time. And having no relationships saved their lives. So respect and love for us to ask that of them, that makes vulnerability very scary. And with that means I might love someone or be hurt if it's taken away from me again. And so it's just so much deeper. And so I would just say, for if you know a foster family or if you're thinking about it, or, Tulsa Girls Home or Tulsa Boys Home or these foster care homes, don't just assume kids are bad. And really get to know those kids and do something. We all have a role to play. And if it is donating, Tulsa Girls Home has the circle where we ask for monthly support, having 7 to 8 teenagers, and then now we're also adding more. It's expensive. You can imagine the amount of laundry and chocolate and ice cream and all the things that come with girls, teenage girls, and wanting their hair braided. And they've always had the hand-me-downs. I mean, we were just at school and Miss Brittany, everyone is in Lululemon and I feel so, left out. And I was like, okay, let's go. Let's go get a sweatshirt. I know brands and those things shouldn't, make you feel, but that's just the truth. I remember my mom getting me Birkenstocks and they were the knockoff ones. And I was mortified in middle school. And I still think about those Birkenstocks that were not the real Birkenstocks and how that year was horrible because I didn't have the Birkenstocks. And so just little things like that, they have never gone shopping. They had never ordered off of a menu, most of our girls. Swimming, just these simple things that we take for granted. And it's wild to me. And so that's one thing, gift cards for the girls. We have our Amazon wish list. But just really being intentional to change our mindset. And that really helps them feel confident when they're wanted. And that's what really Jinx has done for our community. I know we have a mutual friend with Cedar and Lily, and just wanting those girls in her community, in her circle. I mean, how powerful is that? And then with Project Orphans, we always are looking for child sponsors to help provide education and those things to our kids. It's about $25 or $50 a month. And I love it because my kids sponsor kids and they get to communicate with them on the app and send them pictures or buy a chicken, and they get to see that in real time. And I think that's really awesome for our children to think also internationally. Even some of our girls at the girls' home, they work and have jobs and they sponsor little kids in Uganda. And I just think that's the sweetest thing. And so I think those are different ways. And then using your position where you are to raise awareness, or if you are a dentist and you want to give a child braces isn't often covered in kids with foster care. There's some things there. And then really just advocating for the fatherless and, stepping in there. So, yeah, there's always ways to get involved. I think the biggest thing is just don't ignore it.
Okay, that's really good. We talked about perspective and perception, and I mentioned that I went to that movie, and I just remember Possum Trot. I can't remember the whole title.
Is it Sound of...
Yep, Sound of Hope.
Hope.
You're right. And it was so eye-opening to me, and do you remember what you just said to me before we recorded?
Yeah, I said that is the true experience. Being a foster care parent or caring for these kids, it is not easy. And then, that I do believe there is a cycle, and I see it often at the Tulsa Girls Home. The first 2 months, it's, rainbows and butterflies, everything is really happy. And then that third month is really like, it's too good to be true, so I'm going to sabotage it. And, that's when you see those behaviors of pushing someone away or, just finding their place. And they're very insecure in that family system. And so I think in that movie, you see that girl run away. And, she's also looking for relationships in school. And they just don't know who they are. And they're being told by everyone else who they should be, what they should do, who they should trust. And it's been a lie their whole life. Tulsa Girls Home has girls who are true survivors. They normally come to us after 14, 15 years of being in inhumane situations. We've had one girl who was stabbed 71 times by her mom and brought to us. And can you imagine trusting or what those nightmares are at night? And that's something we deal with constantly at TGH's. I hate it when the girls cry in their sleep or they, those nightmares. It's a journey. But once they realize that there's someone who's going to advocate for them and protect them and help their voice, that moment in the movie where she just breaks, that's what we experience. And it's so hard because you're seeing a child break over things that should never have even been in their mind. And I often say my job at Tulsa Girls Home is to say sorry for parents who probably won't. And it's a cycle that we want to stop. And I believe that these parents didn't get the resources and healing that they needed. And for me, my goal, and I really believe this, is so that I never see one of our girls have a kid in foster care. Because they experience what genuine love was. And they know how to give it. And we may all look different, act different, see the world differently. But I don't know one girl from Tulsa Girls Home who's been there or who has gone and graduated or what that looks like, who I can't say genuinely knows love and knows how to give it. And that's the same thing for Uganda too. Our thing is that we love them enough so that when they see injustice done, they do something. And that's what we teach our kids in Uganda and here as well. When you see something that's not right, you do something. And you be that change, even for that one.
You're a glowing example of that for sure.
Well, it takes a community and it really takes a village. And I wouldn't be here without those people who have said, hey, I can't do that part, but let me help. And so I take this position very seriously because there are people who have sacrificed or support us. And when you're doing that and you are on that receiving end to give back, you take that very seriously. And I think that's very important in whatever we do, is that we do it with all that we should do and how we should do it for ourselves and for others. And so we have really one rule at the girls' home and with Project Orphans as well. And we teach our kids, we just say, just be kind. And they're like, that's the only rule. I'm like, Because out of that stems how you react, how you treat someone else, how you take care of your own things, how you just live life. Just be kind. And I say, you don't have to respect me, but just be kind to me. And I'll be kind to you. And that really starts changing the way that everyone thinks. Because I do believe that a child, even in a horrific situation, they understand kindness because they understand that what shouldn't be doing and what hurts. And so respect is a hard word for some kids and with authority and people who've let them down along the way. And so I'm just like, just be kind.
That's a good lesson for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember that when you're driving down the road or picking at the car line.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I don't think anybody should underestimate a woman on a mission. Mm-hmm. I know Greg Conway when he said, because I know Greg and he is phenomenal.
Yes.
And when he said, why don't you do it? I'm sure he was hoping you would, had total faith that you could. Yeah. And it doesn't take long for you to catch up because what you are building and what you've already built is absolutely incredible. And I'm just really happy to have you share your story and a little bit more about what you're doing, and just appreciate so much all the support you're giving to people in Oklahoma and beyond.
Well, thank you for having me. This is awesome. I love it. We as women need to, come together and share purpose together and collectively support one another. And I think we're seeing that more and more now. We used to have to fight for the jobs, and now we realize what we can do together. And can you imagine with purpose behind that? We should be each other's biggest cheerleaders. So I appreciate you having me and giving me this opportunity to share.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate you being here. And don't forget to connect with me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Sharing Passion and Purpose, and Twitter at Passion Sharing. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.